Today on Context, a sex abuse scandal at Penn State brings to light the importance of reporting signs of abuse in sport and helping victims heal. Can faith play a role? I'm Lorna Duick, and you're watching Context, the show that looks at life beyond the headlines. It's news that shocked the sports world. A sex abuse scandal involving a former assistant football coach at Pennsylvania State University. Jerry Sandusky, charged with molesting 8 boys over 15 years. And since the news broke, more victims have come forward. But why have the media focused more on the firing of head coach Joe Paterno rather than the charges against Sandusky? And how do victims of sexual abuse in sports move forward? Let's put it in context. Laura Robinson is one of North America's leading journalists on sex abuse in sport. In her book, Crossing the Line, she uncovered multiple cases of sexual assault in Canadian hockey. She joins us from Winnipeg. So, Laura, should Joe Paterno have been fired for this?
Yes, I think the coach should have definitely been fired for his role in not ensuring that justice was seen to be done at Penn State.
Why such a confused reaction over his firing on the case? He wasn't the guilty person, but he had refused or neglected to report it.
Well, football in the United States and hockey in Canada really are the secular religions of both countries. They're both very much about what I call the theater of maleness, and both countries need to constantly watch this very violent theater of maleness going on. So when you take that away, when you really pull the wool, when you realize that you've had the wool pulled over your eyes all these years and the rug gets pulled out too, people are in such disbelief. And I think the problem is with the disbelief. They cannot believe that their sacred sport called football could ever be part of something so terrible and ugly to do with children.
But at Penn State, coaches saw this shower room mess with 10-year-old boys. They reported it. Why didn't it get stopped much earlier?
I think it's an extremely complex situation in male locker rooms. First of all, I don't think that Penn State football team is any different from virtually every single other American football team where hazing occurs in those locker rooms. And I would bet you that the people who saw that, or who alleged to have seen the 10-year-old boy being raped in the shower, saw some pretty ugly stuff as well in their years in locker rooms. So for them, it didn't look the same as it looked for us. And they did report it, but they didn't bother following up to make sure that this didn't happen again. And I think the reason for that is that it would have blown the roof off of the university as it has, and they just weren't prepared to sacrifice their, wonderful sport of football for the future of children.
Are we learning some lessons out of this Penn State tragedy yet?
We're learning them, but it doesn't seem that we remember them, because Colorado University had a very similar terrible scandal a few years ago where the football team were told basically by the coach to show the high school recruits a good time, and that was proven in court to be code language to get into a girl's room and gang rape her. And that was just settled in 2007, and this took years and years of young women having to come forward, and the coach was fired and the president of the university was fired. This is not the first time we have seen horrendous sex scandals come out of American universities.
You are the reporter in Canada that has made this your beat to cover sex abuse tragedies in sport. Why has it hung on to you that this must be talked about?
Sport can be the most wonderful thing that ever happens to a human being, but it can also be the most terrible thing, and it all depends on the leadership. So when you have a predatory culture, it just is the most devastating thing for children, and it's the most devastating thing for sport. And I'm simply not prepared to have children or sport sacrificed in that way.
Right now, Canada is grappling with minor hockey scandals with hazing in small town hockey teams. Tell us, what do parents need to be aware of in minor sports?
Well, first of all, you have to be there for your child. And as soon as you start saying things like, why didn't you win? Why didn't you check? Or as we often hear in hockey, kill him, or, check him. I think you're asking the child to perform for adults. And all children need to do sport because they love sport, because it makes them feel good. And when children learn that they are to perform and listen to adults, then you set them up to performing for their coach. And that is the really dangerous situation, when the coach can use the culture that tells children they're really just performing. The children learn to do whatever the coach tells them if it's related to their performance. And that is where we really have failed children.
What are we seeing happening with sexual abuse in minor hockey?
Minor hockey has had a policy against hazing for years. It has not been effective. Minor hockey has lots of other policies in sexual assault. However, in preparation for this interview, I spent under an hour on the internet and found 11 examples mainly from 2009 to 2011, one from 2007, that were charges against coaches or players in sexual assault in Canada, and all of them were hockey players or hockey coaches.
You studied the Swift Current Broncos. Sheldon Kennedy is coming up next in our guesting, but what have you found out about sexual abuse team-wide?
I went down to Swift Current in 1993, which was 3 years before Sheldon disclosed what had happened to him, because a learning disabled girl had alleged a gang rape by the team. And it was the same year that one of the years that Sheldon had also been abused. And this was a horrendous alleged gang rape. She bled for 2.5 days. So I really started to talk to more girls. I spent a lot of time in Swift Current. And it turned out that Graham James was a very good coach. He taught boys how to be sex abusers. And over those years, I talked to more and more girls who had been abused by Swift Current Bronco hockey players. And it was a terrible story. One of the girls I couldn't include in my book, Crossing the Line, because she said, even if you don't use my name, but this old boyfriend figures out it was me, he will come out and he will come and kill me, and I just can't risk it.
So while you think this may be an individual crime happening against one person, it's likely a signal that it's many more than one person on a team?
It's far broader. The police, you can talk to the investigative police officers. They believe between 20 and 100 hockey players were sexually abused by Graham James.
Laura Robinson, thank you very much.
You're welcome, Lorna.
Now it's time to find out what you think. Should sports organizations make the background checks on all their employees and volunteers public? Call us, email us, or leave us a video message. We're also on Facebook and Twitter at Context TV. Be part of the conversation. It's an interesting question because Graham James was pardoned, went on to work with more children after a history like that. Had his background check been revealed, it might have been a different story. Well, coming up, former NHL player Sheldon Kennedy. He was sexually abused more than 300 times by his former junior hockey coach, Graham James. We'll find out why he kept it a secret until Mr. James was behind bars. Sheldon Kennedy, next.